Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the not common threads, but antidote to echo chambers. So we did a little bit of a rebranding to our podcast, and our vision and our goal is kind of the same, but we have a different name, and our logo is a bit different. And I'll kind of tell you the reasoning behind that kind of change. So first of all, the new name, antidote to echo chambers. What does that mean? So what is an echo chamber? For those of you who do not know, an echo chamber could be described as an environment. It could be geographical, cultural, and in that environment, you're always surrounded by people who have similar opinions and have similar perspectives. So, and you're in that little chamber, and you don't really hear anything else. Your opinions echo in the room because what you think, everyone else thinks. But why did I say antidote to echo chambers? Is I want to have a cure for that, for an echo chamber. And how do you do that? You listen to varying perspectives. You are open-minded and willing to, hear someone out about with their opinion. So that's sort of our goal. But obviously, we're going to continue doing our mission of uniting people together and trying to find common ground. That's obviously something we're going to keep on doing. But just a bit of a name change, logo change, and just a little slight vision change that we have implemented for our podcast. So without further ado, I'm going to get on with the episode today. So for today's episode, it's going to be a bit more lighthearted and more fun. I think that our past two episodes have been kind of heavy and political in nature. Not really heavy, but just it's not fun, I would say. But for today's episode, I want to do something that's a bit more enjoyable. And today we're going to talk about one of my most favorite subjects, which is philosophy. And what we're going to do today is we're going to rank ethical theories in a tier list. So we're going to rank seven different theories that I'll explain a bit later into five distinct ranks, which is S, A, B, C, and D, with S being the highest and D being the lowest. Now, how I'm going to rank these theories is number one, is it realistic, right? Does it work in real life? Like, could I see this ethical theory being implemented into today's society? That's the first criteria. And number two is, would I want to live in that sort of society? Would I want to live in a world where divine command theory is the norm, or feminist ethics or utilitarianism? Like, I'm gonna try to focus on that for the second. And also, just a disclaimer: just keep in mind that I come with sort of a Western Canadian perspective, so I might be biased in some of my opinions, but also, guys, remember this is just purely for just fun and entertainment purposes. This is nothing serious. I'm not saying like this. If I rank an S, it should be like law here in the West or something. Like, no, that's what I'm saying. It's just something that I'm gonna do to try to see which one might be better than the other. So let's get started. So the first ethical theory I want to look at today is Kant's categorical imperative. So the philosopher Immanuel Kant, he has given us this theory of the categorical imperative, and this kind of proposes that the morality of an action is determined by whether it can be universally applied without contradiction. So basically, it prioritizes moral duty and consistency across all contexts, and it emphasizes the value of certain actions irrespective of the consequences. So to simplify that blurb there, I would say Kant's categorical imperative could be, said in this very famous phrase that we might all know, right? Treat others like how you want to be treated. And Kant actually says it a bit more complicated. He says that we should act only in accordance with that maxim, through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. So what it basically says is that, for example, right? Let's just say I wanted to rob a convenience store, right? I wanted to rob a convenience store, but then I have to realize that, okay, if I were to rob a convenience store, then everyone should be allowed to rob a convenience store, and I would have to live in that sort of society. Or maybe, I don't know, just I could give many other different examples, but basically says that whatever you do or how you act, it should be a universal law, and everyone should be able to act that way. So that's what Kant's kind of saying there. And also, guys, I'm dumbing down a lot of these ethical theories. I could go so much more in depth, but for the sake of time, I just want to keep it nice and concise today, but maybe in another future episode, I'll dive in deeper and maybe bring an expert onto the podcast. So I guess the first criteria is realistic. It seems kind of idealistic and utopian in nature because I'm not sure if actual human beings want to live in that sort of society. I'm not sure about you, but like for example, there are certain things that we do in our day to day life that are kind of just. I'm gonna use the word guilty pleasures. Like we want to do it, but we know it's kind of wrong. Like for example, I mean, people lie all the time, right? I'm sure you've lied maybe in the past week or so, and many people lie. But if people were to lie in Kant's ethical moral theory, ethical theory society, then it means that everyone should be able to lie, and lying shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, right? And lying is bad. I could say that right now. You can quote me on that. But sometimes lies could be used in a positive way. And I think that's one example of me saying that people might not want to live in this sort of society. So realistic, maybe not. Number two, would I personally want to live in this kind of society? Um, I think this is a good question, but I personally would not want to live in this society. I think that there's certain things that we personally do that are sort of like if you know what I mean. But if it were like a societal norm, it would kind of not really work that way. So I would say I would rank this in the B tier. I give credit to Kant, um, because it might work, but I've never seen it in person in any historical context. So I'll give this a solid B. Next, we are going to look at utilitarianism. So, utilitarianism, this one's a bit more of a famous one, so you might know already. But it was advocated by philosophers such as Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, and it suggests that the morality of an action is determined by its consequences. Specifically, an action is considered morally right if it maximizes overall happiness or pleasure and minimizes suffering or pain for the greatest number of individuals affected by the action. This consequentialist approach provides a clear and quantifiable framework for evaluating ethical choices. However, critics contend that utilitarianism can sometimes overlook individual rights and dignity, potentially leading to situations where minority interests are sacrificed for the greater good. So, utilitarianism, greatest good for the greatest number of people. Pretty straightforward there. However, this it might seem good when you first hear it, or at least that's what I heard, what I thought of it. But if you kind of look at it in a realistic framework, it might not really work, right? So as I just said before, there might be certain situations where the majority, or I guess the people, that are all happy and receiving the greatest happiness, there might be a minority that might be negatively affected. So and yeah, they might be sacrificed for the greater good. And also, there's also difficulty in accurately predicting in what is the greatest happiness. What constitutes happiness, right? That's another philosophical question we ask all the time. So if we can't define what happiness is, and if we say that happiness is subjective, how could we say that utilitarianism might work in real life, right? So that's one question to think of there. So let's just go on with the criteria. So number one, is it realistic? I think just a lot of things we do in our time, just in the modern world, is based off of utilitarianism. I think we try to vie for the greatest number of like the greatest pleasure, and like we try to do things that give us joy. So it works, I think, with human nature. I think humans have a distinct characteristic of trying to find meaning, of trying to find happiness, and I think Bentham and Mill really, got that right. Right, being an ethical theory that is in line with human nature. However, in a realistic perspective, again, you know, just because that everyone is happy doesn't mean the thing is right. For example, right? I'll give an example. Um, let's see, Nazi Germany, right? In Nazi Germany, the people of Nazi Germany, they were brainwashed and by Nazi propaganda, and they were happy, right? They were thinking, okay, this war is good because this is this is the information that they're feeding me, and I don't think anybody was very suspicious until after the war, and you know, and in that time period, right? How are you going to say that just because all those people are content and happy that it was the right moral theory, right? They shouldn't be happy because millions of people were getting slaughtered, and genocide was occurring. So how could you say that? So in that perspective, it might not work, right? So is it realistic? Yes, but also there also is some flaws. And number two, would I want to live in that sort of society? Yes, I think I would, because I think utilitarianism satisfies the basic human desire to find happiness, and if you can maximize it, I think that would lead to a overall happier society. So I would say yes. So maybe I would rank that in the A tier. We're not at the S tier yet, but I would say A tier just because of its certain flaws. Okay, so we just looked at the categorical imperative and utilitarianism. Can't speak English today, but we're gonna get on to our next theory, which is divine command theory. So, command theory asserts that moral principles are derived from the commands of a divine being or beings. According to this view, actions are morally right if they align with the will of a deity or divine entity. Proponents of this theory argue that it provides a foundation for moral absolutes and objective moral standards, rooted in the authority of a higher power. However, critics raise questions about the epistemological basis of divine commands and the potential for differing interpretations of religious texts, leading to moral relativism and conflicts between religious doctrines. So, divine command theory is, I guess you could think of it as laws and an ethical theory posited by God, and it's very based off of religious texts such as the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, and the many other religious texts that exist in the world today. So, this is an interesting one because we have had times in history where divine command theory was a theory that was implemented in real life. For example, you see the monarchs in the 18th century, the 17th century, for example, in France. The leaders were seen as sent by God, and and because of that, they align with the will of a divine entity. And a lot of like laws, like for example, in Calvinist Geneva, right? Everyone was living by like very strictly by laws of the Bible interpreted by the Calvinists, and we've seen what happened in Calvinist Geneva. Like we see the persecution and things like that. But anyways, we're not going to go off a tangent about history. But let's just quickly go to our criteria. Is realistic? I mean, that's happened. It has not. I'm not going to say it worked, but it was a thing. So I could say in that sense, yes. Is it realistic right now? No, because I think we are living in an ever secular society. I think it's hard to say that we could totally like, snap and like we're all gonna follow the rules of religious texts. And then how are you gonna like another problem rises that like which religion is right, which religions rules and ethics are actually true. Like how are you going to determine that? Like even today we have a lot of people have debates on is it like Christianity versus Islam, or it could be a bunch of like comparing different religions and seeing which one's better and which one's true. So if we can't even figure that out, like how are we going to say like this one's the one we should live by, right? So it's not realistic in today's time. There are certain countries though, like for example Saudi Arabia, or maybe Afghanistan, who their set of laws very much follow their religious text, which is very interesting. But I'm talking about Western world, so no, it is not realistic right now. Would I want to live in that sort of world? So it's very important to remember that even religious texts, even some people might claim that it's good and it's like because God is loving and divine and all knowing and all powerful, like it has to be a good theory. But there's certain flaws that you see everywhere. Like for example, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, you see examples of in the Bible not condemning slavery, and those little things are little flaws, but they're very substantial flaws, in the sense where if you're going to have an ethical theory, it has to be perfect. And especially if it's from God, it should be perfect. So, no, I don't think I would want to live in that society just because of its shortcomings. So, I would give that What tier should I give this one? Divine contract theory should be. I think I'll give it a C tier. I give it a C tier because there's certain things in religious texts, for example, Christianity, that are good, right? Like to love your own neighbor. I think that's a good example of the Bible promoting goodwill. However, obviously, as I said before, the flaws and the inability to actually implement it in real life is why I give it a C tier. Well, folks, that's actually a wrap for today's episode on ethical theories. You might have, noticed that this episode was a bit shorter than usual. But before you go, let me just explain. There's a reason for that, and I guess the reason is we wanted to give you a quick taste of some key ethical perspectives without just totally overwhelming you with so much information at once. Ethical theories tend to be very vast and broad, so covering all of them in one episode wouldn't be the greatest idea, and I'm not sure if you would enjoy that either. So we kept it nice and short, but we got a lot more ground to cover and we're just getting warmed up. So stay tuned for part 2, where we're definitely going to dive even deeper into the complexities of ethical theories. I guess just to sum up what we went over in today's episode, just for your memory, a nice refresher, we learned Kant's categorical imperative, utilitarianism, and divine command theory. And just to, I guess, explain those a bit further, Kant, his emphasis on universal moral principles, like treat others like you would treat yourself, and utilitarianism. What is utilitarianism? The focus, right? The focus on maximizing overall happiness, greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, right? And divine command theory, with its reliance on divine will, and from religious texts. And, it's really interesting and important to learn all these theories because they offer unique insights into how we might grapple with some of questions that we deal with every day, such as what is right and what is wrong, right? And learning these theories might help you navigate through that question. And, here at Antidote to Echo Chambers, as I mentioned before in the beginning, we have rebranded. We believe in keeping things fresh, keeping you on your toes, and always, always leaving you wanting more. So if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe or follow and stay tuned for future installments. We're on all major social media platforms and you can find us on Instagram. And let's keep the conversation going, right? Share your thoughts, your questions, your reflections with us on social media. Our tag is ATEC Podcast, ATEC standing for Antidote to Echo Chambers. So leave us a message there. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your questions, your feedback. We would be very grateful for that. And just engaging with our amazing community, right? So, anyways, thanks for joining us on this mini and short adventure into the vast world of ethical theories. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, keep clicking on these type of content, like keep learning, right? I think learning is a lifelong journey, and I really commend you for wanting to learn more today. So anyways, this was Daniel Park at Antidote to Echo Chambers, and I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.